I am Jennifer Torrence. I'm a curator at nyMusikk, and you are listening to the nyMusikk podcast. This is the third episode in our series, The Composer in an Urban Landscape. In this series, we've been looking at the practices of three different artists and how they work with urban sound as material in their compositions. What you just heard is a short excerpt from Martin Hirsti-Kvam's work, Through Imaginary Landscapes, which was premiered at the Darmstadt summer course in 2021 and performed by Ensemble Adapter, on the Marthe, Sørlien, Holen, and myself. Martin is the third and final artist in this series, and today we will be talking to him about his interest in the listener's position, or the role of listening from the audience perspective, as well as his use of technology in creating these listening situations. Martin and I will be talking about two of his works. One is the older work Hyperrealities, which was premiered in 2017 at the Spore Festival in Aarhus, and then this newer work from 2021, Through Imaginary Landscapes. Martin will tell us about how Hyperrealities was a turning point for him in his practice, because it was in this work that he discovered the potential of focusing on the position of the listener in relation to headphones and carefully placed microphones. The audience wears these headphones, and then Martin is able to choose which microphone in public space is turned on, and then is able to compose layers of realities at once. He defines hyperreality as a term that explains the phenomenon when perceptual reality is seamlessly blended together with an augmented reality, so that it's difficult or impossible to distinguish between where one ends and where the other begins. Now, this is a term from postmodernism, in particular the theorist Jean Baudrillard, but in practical terms, anybody who has played Pokemon Go has a sense of what Martin is concerned with. He is trying to mix what is in the world without mediation with what technology can also provide. So in his work, Hyperrealities, and also later in Through Imaginary Landscapes, he is mixing live sound that is occurring in the room with pre-recorded sound. And he also does this with video, mixing live video that you can see is happening right in front of you with pre-recorded video that blurs the beginning and the end of what we would call reality. So it's a complex set of ideas, but Martin has a very virtuosic way of integrating these technologies with instrumental performance and live performance to create these spaces that are somehow dreamlike, that seem to behave like our mind, the way we can quickly move between thoughts and memories and projections of the future, but doing this through music composition. So Martin, let's start with Hyperrealities. Can you talk about this piece and why it was so important for your practice?
This whole process started with back in 2017, like kind of by coincidence, with this work called Hyperrealities, which was sound installation or sound walk, and in this piece I used live microphones in the urban space, with pre-recorded sound from that place and other places. So I guess I'm fascinated by this notion of being at two places at the same time, kind of as you walk around in the city, for instance, and your mind wanders and you remember another place, and suddenly you can hear the sounds from that place, but you're also in that place that you're actually in. So this notion of changing between those environments seamlessly and going in and out in the way that memory works, I think is interesting to me.
Right, and your work is unique because in these particular pieces, the audience is given these headphones, which I think underlines the fact that they're moving in and out of these listening situations, these situations where they think they hear the place that they're in, but it's a recording that you made days before. Can you talk more about this use of the headphones as a way of underlining the listening position?
When we listen normally, then our ears filter out a lot of the sounds around us. So that's, how when you can, listen to a conversation between two people in a crowded cafe, then you can, the way our brain works is that you can, focus in on these conversations and so on. But when you listen with headphones, the microphones don't have these the capabilities as the ear has, I guess. So it flattens the space completely. So every sound that you listen to has, equal value. So when you listen with the headphones to an amplified space, all sounds become kind of equal. And you listen to them in a different way than you would, because you don't try to filter out conversations or other interesting things, but you kind of listen to them as sounds. And what also happens is that if you add, pre-recorded sounds into this, it's very hard for the ear or the mind to decipher what's the difference between those. So in this piece, there are several microphones placed around the urban landscape, which gives me the ability to, focus in on different things in the environment. So you can zoom in, kind of, as in film, to different objects. And also, you get this, you can kind of compose with the space in this way by mixing different perspectives from microphones placed around the urban environment.
So in hyperrealities, the audience hears microphones that are static, and they are moving around in the space and are busy deciphering their own experience as they move through the urban environment and are hearing this mixture of live and pre-recorded sound. But in Through Imaginary Landscapes, it's a little bit different. So can you explain that difference in between these two pieces and your use of the microphone and also the audience's ability to move through the world?
So in this hyperrealities piece, the microphones are static, but the audience can move around. But in this Through Imaginary Landscapes piece, it is a normal concert setting. So the audience are sitting in their seats with headphones, but there is a dynamic listening perspective with this listener soloist who has binaural microphones in their ears. And the idea is that she works kind of as an avatar for the audience and, physically walks through the piece. And in that way, gives the audience a dynamic listening perspective.
You mentioned the idea of a listener soloist. I find it really interesting that in your work Through Imaginary Landscapes, you have created a work for Ensemble where there are two soloists, but one of the soloists' role is to listen. It's very poetic, and it underlines your fascination with this activity, particularly through the mediation of technologies. Can you describe a bit more? What is this listener role? Perhaps you can even start with the second movement of Through Imaginary Landscapes, which is a movement where the listener soloist's job is simply to walk around on stage while wearing binaural microphones that are being sent to the audience's headphones, so that the audience is hearing this person traveling through the room, hearing their arrival and departure from the different positions in the room and different proximities to the other musicians.
My inspiration and idea for this part of the piece is that this idea of a person walking around in changing environments and times. So while you hear the listening soloist walking around on stage, you also hear the cutting between different places in and around Oslo. At the same time, corresponding exactly with the movements of the soloist on stage. I was inspired by the idea that you could walk through different times and different places at the same time as you hear the sounds of the musicians on stage. Yeah, I'm interested in my pieces to create, or I guess subvert in a way the normal concert situation, to create or to use technology and microphones to be able to structure a piece around changing perspectives in a way of moving or changing the perspectives of the audience in the piece by moving between different microphones. In this piece there is also a live camera that goes in and out. I think technology is a very good way of being able to, I guess, simulate how the mind works, how the mind wanders, how you can think at being at one place and listening to another place. And by using live video combined with pre-recorded video, overlaid on top of each other in different layers, moving from one to the other, without the audience knowing, you're suddenly transported from one place to the other, and trying to compose with that in a structured way. You can kind of stage this mind wandering in a compositional dramaturgy, which I find interesting.
I really think that the way that you integrate these technologies together with Western classical acoustic instruments is completely unique. I just want to turn now, because in this series we have been talking about the practices of Christina Kubisch and Luigi Russolo and several composers who have been using Russolo's instruments. And it struck me that a question comes up in my mind, which is, okay, this acceptance of environmental noise as a musical material has been going on for a long time, and it has been a very fruitful starting point for artistic practices and aesthetic ideas. But now we find ourselves in an environmental crisis. And I start to reflect on the fact that the ideas born of the Industrial Revolution, which have been inspiring, have also been the seed of some very complicated problems that we don't have very many solutions for so far. How do you respond to a provocation that this work and its belief in technology somehow continues a romanticization of ideas from the Industrial Revolution that are holding us back from survival as we know it?
Yeah, I actually find myself, being entangled in these questions myself, because in these installations in public space, using technology, there was also this surveillance aspect, that you're kind of listening in to other people's conversations, there is a very problematic, or there can be a problematic side to that as well. That you're kind of composing with this urban space, and people don't know that they're being recorded, and it can be an intrusive thing as well. So there's always this ambivalent aspect to technology, which I found in my work, which is also, of course, present in all these, in that way of working with noise all the way from Rousseau until now. But I guess this type of technology also doesn't need to concern itself only with, urban sounds or noise. There is a long tradition of sound art and sound walking, which has a profound connection to the environment and the sounds around you. So, in a way, this way of working, it's also a humble position that you're taking in the environment around you, and you're responding to the sounds around you in the space, which is supposed to bleed into the piece in a way.
I realize that this is becoming a bit about my own thoughts now, having been researching and talking to artists working with this. But I guess I'm just reflecting on, is there criticism inside of recording and using these sounds? Or is it purely an artistic mining, if you will, for new material? I wonder how you think about this. I know there's sound of helicopters in your work through imaginary landscapes and other unplanned sounds. When you hear these sounds, these objects that carry a certain inherent violence, which at this point in our crisis on planet Earth, most urban sounds innately carry this seed of violence. Do you have any reflections on this, around the possibility of a threat of criticism towards these sounds and the use of technology to tame them?
I've actually been feeling this violent connection to these sounds quite a bit recently, because I have this ongoing project that I've been going to these 5 places in the woods around my house and recording them every month. I would go to the same place and record these places. And it was supposed to be a piece that takes in the changing of the seasons and all this in the woods. But the problem is that a lot of these recordings I have to wait for these constant planes coming in and kind of destroying or disturbing the peace of the woods. So I've been feeling this a lot recently, that there isn't any sanctuary in these woods. I have to constantly wait for the plane sounds to depart, so I can create this nature sounds, I guess, that I wanted. So now I think it has to be in the piece, because that is the sound now of being in the woods around Oslo, that there is a constant barrage of noise and airplanes seeping in, and so this notion of undisturbed nature and it isn't there anymore. So I mean, one way that I could deal with this is, of course, to cut away all the plane sounds, but then that would be an idealized version of so-called nature.
Actually, Christina Kubisch had a similar observation or realization when she made an electrical walk in San Francisco, and she realized that there's so much electromagnetic activity. It's too dense, it's too constant, so she couldn't compose with it. So now she finds herself looking for places that have some gaps in electromagnetic activity. So it seems to pose the question, have we reached some kind of limit for where these urban sounds still have a kind of musical fragility or unpredictability that makes it possible to compose with? Thank you, Martin, for sharing all of this with us, and thank you to those of you who've been listening to these 3 episodes. Let us know what you think about it, and we hope to continue this in the future.